Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar on SketchUp extensions and tips to improve Enscape renderings. Very much looking forward to today's topic, and I'm sure you are too, so thank you very much for joining us. To quickly introduce myself, I'm Gemma Da Silva. I'm part of the Enscape marketing team, and I will be your host today. So as you can see, I am not alone. I am super excited to welcome back Joseph Kim, who is a project manager at MJM Architects. And Joseph has actually presented with us on a few webinars now, so I'm pleased he is back with us. More insights, more tips, and this time focused on SketchUp and Enscape. So welcome, Joseph. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
So today it's going to be very much a practical session. So we're going to be spending a lot of time in SketchUp, diving into Enscape a little bit as well. And we will definitely have time for questions. So if you do have a question that pops up as we go through the webinar, feel free to put it into the questions pane and we will get to as many as we can. Another thing to note is that we have added a handout today as well. So if you head over to the control panel of your GoToWebinar, you should see a little handout there. So you can download that and follow along as we go. So you're welcome. And thank you, Joseph, for putting it together.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yes, good. So with that, I think we can just dive in, get straight into it. So Joseph, I will hand over to you and away we will go.
All right. Thank you, Gemma, for introduction. And if you guys would download the PDF handout, that would be a good thing to follow through. I'll try to keep track of things, but there's going to be a lot of screenshots and notes for you to even reference back even after the session. So it would be a good reference for you guys to have. Obviously, if you have any questions regarding the actual session and the PDF handout, then please put it in the question so that I can answer them at the end of the session. First, I wanted to start off kind of figuring out what we're going to do for rest of the session since I had the question of where. And we're basically getting all the extensions off of the extension warehouse is the primary place that I will try to point to if the extensions are available. So if you would like to find that place, you just go to extensions on the drop-down menu and then click on extension warehouse. And then that will bring up a little window that basically lets you know where to find the extensions. However, that is not the only place that we're going to find extensions from. There's a place called SketchUcation, which I will reference to. And let me also pause the webcam view so you guys could enjoy the more screen real estate. But here is the SketchUcation page. And here you can sign up as a free account with a free account, and you should be able to download their plugins in there. They do have a lot of duplicates, but it is also a good resource to download a lot of extensions in here. So if it's an extension that I'm downloading from here, then I'll reference that as well. So those are the places that you want to look into whenever you're trying to find a specific extensions. And the next one that I want to show you is also the extension manager. So obviously, once you have all of those things installed, there's extension manager, which will let you know what kind of extensions that you have installed. As you can see, I've got quite a few over here. I think it's about 50 extensions that I have is a typical amount of extensions that I carry through version to version, but you can also manage them. Time to time, it will prompt you to update a specific type of extension so you can automatically update through a button here. And I think that is only limited to the ones that you get from the extension warehouse. However, once you install the ExtensionStore extension that you get from the SketchUcation, you get these 3 buttons, as well as if you go down here to the extensions, and you should be able to find this drop down that says SketchUcation, and then a lot more buttons are available here. So the extension store actually looks like this. This is essentially an extension that they have made to basically work inside of SketchUp. And I really like this because if you go to the settings, then you can look at a couple of things that you have already downloaded, also profile to see how many things that you have done as a this member, but also something I often do here is a bundles. This basically lists all the computers that I have logged in and downloaded from. It goes back to a very long time ago, and you can see how many computers that I have touched over the years. But if we look somewhere over here, perhaps back in when I was in London, and then if I were to expand it, you'll see all the extensions that I have downloaded on that machine. So you can count up to 72 extensions that I have downloaded via this extension store back then. So you can certainly get that and then even download it into this machine. So it's a very good way to keep up with all the list of extensions, and that's how I also have been managing over the years as well. So any of the extensions that you find useful, you can certainly use these methods to manage them and then carry it through different type of versions or machines that you'll be jumping into. I used to have a lot more extensions button listed up here, but I kind of graduated them because I've been jumping so many machines. It's so hard to keep up with all the extensions that gets listed here. So I try to find them through the menu system. So that's what I will be doing. But you are more than welcome to enable them and then actually dock it onto the icon up here. So via just right-clicking on the empty space of the menu bar and then just clicking on whichever extension you feel like you need to have up there. But a couple of the things that I use quite frequently are up there. Today's session, I'm going to try to be more focused on freely available extensions, just so that you can get all of your hands on with all of these freely available extensions. But perhaps it could be another follow-up session of some of the paid extensions as well. So hopefully we'll get to have a good sort of feedback. So feel free to leave feedback after the session. I'd love to hear what kind of things that you would like to hear even more about. So what else? So we're trying to focus on extensions. However, I'll be dropping all those best practices that I have learned over the years, and also the tips and tricks, if you will. And I use a lot of shortcuts, so I'll be referencing them as well. I have a long list of shortcuts that I typically use, but I'm gonna spill some of them that I have sort of figured out and thought it works well to me. Obviously, you can always change shortcuts as well, so I'll mention them as we go through the session. But another thing that I wanted to mention was the use of some white outlined 2D people. If you were to go to 3D Warehouse, and then this is obviously a good source to find any of the assets that SketchUp has, and you get all different type of products and everything. I'm sure everyone is aware of this awesome 3D warehouse, but you also get a lot of things that you may not need. And something that I feel is kind of necessary for myself is what I do is white outlined people. And I called it that because I cannot spell silhouettes. But if I search that, nothing comes up. But if you go to models, then that will be the component that I have uploaded. And this basically contains all the white outline people, which I'll be using in this session to show you how that gets used. So obviously you can just go ahead and download that. And then once you download that, you can easily just grab it from the browser that you're using and then just drop it like that. And you can easily just have that inside of your model. So there's a little bit of tip there. And then I can basically have them here and then use them however I like. So there is that. And what else? By the way, something I forgot to mention is that if you under the SketchUcation store, there are a few other functions that are available here in addition to the actual extension store bit. Something that I do use quite often is my shortcuts. I mean, not for my purpose, but just to show other people, is that once you click on that, it actually shows you in graphics what kind of shortcuts that you are using. So I don't know, you might be able to glimpse at what kind of shortcuts that I'm using over here. And that is certainly helpful graphics for you to see. All the shortcuts that you use are listed next to the menu names. So you can certainly utilize that too. However, seeing all the shortcuts listed in a single place is definitely helpful as well. So that's what I wanted to mention on there. And then something that I do want to point out here is the styles dialog. Before we get into very specific type of workflow, I want to mention a couple of generic best practices that I have been utilizing. Is the fact that when you go to my styles dialog, let me go ahead and collapse this so you guys could see a little better. So mine is a default style. It is meant to be light so that I can easily work through it and not experience any stutter. But also something that may jump out is the fact that my back face is a bright blue. And you can see that blue over here, here where the back face has been exposed. And I intentionally do that because a lot of rendering engines, including Enscape, may not function properly if you're using backface and material applied to it. So you want to make sure you're not ever seeing at the back face of any sort of model that you have created. So the way you do that is by clicking on face settings, and then back color, you want to make it to some color that is bright so that it is recognizable so that you can address them. In my case, I do like this sort of teal blue, so I just kind of left it at that and made it bright enough for me to spot it. This is an actual material color that I assigned here. However, this is a back face that is being exposed. So I know immediately I need to do something about this. So that is what the face style is playing inside of the styles dialog here. Something I do want to mention is that I typically turn off profiles. You can have the profiles turned on and you get a nice outline over the trees, but depending on the type of model, especially if you have something really big, you can experience sort of stutters with your machine, especially if you got profiles turned on for these type of trees and throwing outlines for every single leaf. They can really eat up your resources. So because of that, I typically turn off the profile. If you want to have it as one, and then turn it off if you want to avoid having that stutter issues. And especially if you need edges, you will still see edges. It's just a profile that are going to be thrown onto rounded surface. So that is really helpful to just kind of speed up your modeling process for the rendering. So with that, I also want to touch on a couple of workflow shortcuts that I use. One that I do want to mention immediately is component edit. So if you go down to the view, a drop-down dialog, and then component edit, and then I use H for hide rest of model. And I believe this is a custom shortcut. If you want to change any of the shortcuts, then you go to the what I just went there, window preferences, and then under there you can find the shortcuts. And I highly advise whenever you make changes to your existing shortcuts, you export the files so that you can call them back on later versions of SketchUp or a different machine. And I do that so every time I switch machine, I import the shortcuts into the machine so I have a consistent shortcuts that I have a muscle memory of. And here, basically, you search for hide rest of model. There's one there, and then I basically hit H over here and then hit plus button, And then I already have that as assigned, so I'm not going to do that, but you can see that I already have a button of H to do that. And then what that does is basically when I actually double clicked in here, you see how all the people are really hard to see under the tree. They're just hiding there. But if I hit H, then it just hides rest of the model so that I can actually look at the thing that I'm working on. Then this is gonna come in handy. You'll see me use this shortcut throughout this session, and it becomes really useful. However, you don't want to have this hidden completely permanently, because you often want to reference, okay, I do want to put this person over at another place, but I have no idea where I'm putting that person into. So I hit H again so I can actually reference and see where I'm putting that person into. So that's basically what I hit H for. Going back and forth becomes really, really useful. Another aspect to this is I have this the top, the roof portion of the building, as well as the wall and the interior portion of the building as a separate group. So that's also something that I wanted to mention, just grouping and layering and organization process. But especially here, I utilize something as a hide and unhide process. So for hide, I have assigned Shift H. And then for unhide all, I have assigned a Shift U for unhide. So often I do Shift H and Shift U to get things back and hide, hidden and unhide that back. So for example, if I want to look inside because I want to manipulate the furniture or whichever that's inside of the building, I have grouped the entire roof portion of this building, including the structure, into one single group. You can see that by as I highlight this, it's going to highlight as a group up here. So if I hit Shift H, then it is going to hide that roof and make it really easy to look inside and do whichever task that I need to do here. And also here, that roof is separated from that. So if I need to just look inside the building, I can quickly look inside. And if I need to come out and see how that all looks like together, I hit Shift U to unhide everything. So I can just go back quickly. So just quickly hiding it and then manipulating something inside and then unhiding and then backing out is sort of the workflow. And also something you can do is hide them. And then I also assign a specific scene that is ready for modeling. So I do highly advise putting some scenes together so that you guys could always reference back to a specific position. But I always have a first layer that's called model that basically tells me that is the model, basically usually an aerial view that I go back to, and then I can just click on that and everything becomes unhidden so that I can start modeling back into the model. Whereas other scenes may be inside of a building and just coming out to the spot could take a bit more time and unhiding rather than clicking on this. So that is sort of my model organization system that I've got. In regards to the actual organization, something that I do want to touch on are the tags. And it used to be referred as layers, but it is now tags. So this is how things are sort of labeled or tagged, if you will. So I have this number/naming scheme, and everyone's gonna have different workflows. Obviously, if you're working on interior scene, you probably want a bit granular numbering and naming scheme on your specific scene or the model's requirement. So this is my general sort of layer setup for this specific model, but depending on the project, it may differ. The logic here that I have used is whatever that is the main thing that I definitely need are belonging onto 00 numbers, but then anything that gets added on top, but stuff like structure, walls, they're number 1, and then the secondary elements become doors, roof, windows as a secondary, and then furniture, landscape, lights become tertiary or number 3, and then the 4th would be people, plants, trees, And then the cards and decorations are the things that can easily be turned off and forget about. So that's what I have dedicated as. So I guess sort of a priority list, if you will. And this way I have an easy control of how to turn things on and off. If I want to make people go away, then I can easily just click on this and have them go away. Obviously, I just imported these people, so they don't belong onto a specific tag, but I can go in here rather than on of the entire group. I actually go in here and select all, which is Control A, and then I just put all of these components or the nested groups into a specific tag that I would like it to belong to, or them to belong to. So I can have them turned off or turned back on, that sort of thing. So make sure you go through that practice. The more tags that you have, it's going to be more difficult to organize throughout busy day that you have. So it's actually kind of advised to keep this list minimal and not have more than, let's say, 20, because if you hand over to different people, or if you're just going through that deadline that you need to go through, then it's going to become really troublesome to keep up with those things. And you can expect, okay, I hide people, but then some of them are going to still show because I just haven't designated all those people into that layer just yet. So that's going to happen. I've been there, done that, but minimizing the amount of the tags will definitely help you in terms of keeping things organized. Another aspect, so this is, I guess, the first extension that I'm going to mention, and right off the bat, it is going to be the one from ExtensionStore. What you need to do is you can go to the search section over here and then search it. And this is called layer name export. And obviously it used to be called layer rather than tag. So this is how things get a little confusing here. There's a lot of extensions that has to do with layers already, but here is the one, layer name export / import. It is made by TIG. And obviously, if you can't recall these names that I'm talking about or a specific place to get it from, you can reference the PDF that we have uploaded prior to the session. So you can download that, and I have notes regarding that. So you can certainly look back into that. And that PDF basically looks like this. So I list the name of the extension that I'm referring to, and then little screenshot of what that does, or a little explanation of what that does. So hopefully you'll be able to reference that back. And basically you just go ahead and install or download. You may get this little pop-up, just install onto your first folder. And then that basically will install that for you. And how to get that, usually it kind of tells you where to get it from. Plugins actually have changed to extensions, so you can find it under extensions, drop down layer XIM or export import, and then you can find it there. So for example, if I go to here, and then there's gonna be, hopefully I can find it. Layer X, it's not, okay, oh, it's over here. Almost missed it. So here I can go ahead and export, and basically you can export that as, export all the list of the tags as a file, but you can also go ahead and import. So go ahead and import, and then I basically have this layers that I have saved up long time ago in 2017, but I can just open that, and you can see that I've got a lot more layers than what I was currently utilizing. And so you can keep your standard list of tags that you want to stick to and the numbering scheme that you like, and then export it, and then basically keep one handy. So every time you start a model, then you have a specific layer list to go by, and you can't really, if you can't remember something, then you can always go back to. But other than that, I prefer to keep the list light for this session as well. So the extension that I definitely do want to utilize is another one from SketchUcation ExtensionStore, and it is called Purge All. And it is from the same gentleman called Tiggs. You'll see his name quite a few times in the session, and you download that. And actually, once you download that, that is going to exist over here. And I have designated a shortcut of Shift-0 to just basically zero out everything. Um, Not always, but consistently. Well, I've tried. What I have attempted or tried was that have shift whenever I'm using an extension. So you'll see more so of shift being used for the modifier key of some number or some keys in my shortcut list. So if I run that or hit Shift-0, then basically that calls up this dialog. I will have everything as yes, and then okay. And that basically purges all the things that are not being used. And obviously all the extra layers that was imported in, or the tags, if you will, have been purged. So all of those went away. All the empty ones just went away. And that is going to be true for all the components and the materials that exist in a model but not have been used will be purged. And if you have not ever run this extension, your file size can drastically improve, and it wouldn't necessarily make the model faster, but it will drastically reduce your overall file size. And especially when you're rendering, then you need to keep your file size down and your model kind of more optimized. So that will definitely come in handy. Just like how you habitually hit save, you want to get in habit of hitting this purge all or Shift-0 in my case, and then hit enter, and then also hit OK to accept that. And I just have that habit of doing that. So it's sort of a muscle memory at this point. Another set of shortcuts and workflow that I want to mention is copy, cut, and paste, but mostly paste in place. So as you can see here, I've lifted the tops off of the buildings, the roof portion, and you can see that whilst I've got all the walls intact, and if I hide rest of the model, you'll see everything is just kind of groups within groups, so-called nested groups, so that I can easily manipulate them. That's very nice. But you'll notice that as I turn this on and off, some lighting fixtures don't really belong inside of this group. And that is arguable, however you want to handle it. Obviously, I've got this set of stuff down here that doesn't belong inside of this group. So that just kind of turns on and off. So there's obviously a bit more organization that I need to do here. But in order to do that, how do I get those things inside here? The way I do this is by, if I come out of this group by hitting escape once, and I come out here, and then all the lightings are going to be here. So I can just select all of that and then cut, which is Control X, which is a native shortcut for cutting things. And then I double click into this group. And then what you can do is go to Edit, Paste in Place. And I've actually assigned a custom shortcut of Control-Shift-V, which is actually a standard shortcut for a lot of Adobe softwares. So it is sort of a known shortcut, Control-Shift-V. And then once you do that, then that basically paste in those cut elements into that specific group. So you can easily move elements inside and out of a group and basically have it in the same place. And not quibble about, because if you were to try to just copy and paste, then you're going to have to come up with a right reference point, and that can be tough, especially for things that are floating like this. So you can do that here, and notice how the structure bit is actually outside of the group. So let's go ahead and select that, as well as this one over here, and then this one over here. And I'm doing that by holding down Control key as a modifier key. At the bottom of the screen, it'll note that which one you need to hold down to add or subtract, that sort of thing. And here I've selected these three things, and then I'm going to hit cut, which is Control X again, and then go into this group, and then Control Shift V, and that will just put it into this group so that they all belong together. Same practice for these two type of lights, as well as this group over here. So I'm going to do this and then that, and then these lights, and then cut. And depending on the specific component size, it may hang for a bit, but here I can just paste them in here so that they all just are grouped together. It's hanging a little bit to paste them in.
While that's kind of hanging, Joseph,
Yeah,
just a quick time check. We're
of
half past the
course.
hour, but there was a question that came in when you were just using the purge all extension.
Hmm.
If you wouldn't mind just quickly answering that one. So, what's the advantage of using the purge all extension over the standard purge tool that's built into SketchUp?
Oh, absolute. Great question. The shortcut assignment is basically that because you have to go to, I believe it's been so long since I use the standard purge tool. You have to go down, digging that through window, model info, statistics, purge unused, and you don't have a way to filter whether you want all the layers to be consolidated or material or the component in here. So that's a single button and then no filter available. Whereas if you were to use purge all function, you can assign a shortcut for it. And then, for example, if I actually wanted all the layers to still exist because I'm still going through an organization process, then I can certainly utilize that and then say no for it so that it doesn't purge all the layer. Great question.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, do you have any other question actually?
Someone was just saying that they can't find the layer name export.
Oh, I see. Make sure you download that extension and have it installed. If you can't find that somewhere up here, if you just have installed it, you may find it at the bottom of your extension drop-down menu. All the new ones show up here, but then once you restart SketchUp, it shows in the middle of the menu. So that's
Great.
where I can leave that as.
Excellent.
Um,
Thank you very much.
Yep, I'll go ahead and continue along. Try to go down through this list. Again, I have mentioned the setup of all the different scenes, so you can go through these scenes very, very quickly and make sure to put meaningful names. If you just have it as scene 1, 2, 3, you have no idea later on which one you're supposed to look at. So I highly advise at least making sure assigning names to your scenes. And now we want to look at we talked about purge all. So another thing that I do want to mention is something called selection toys. And that one will be available through Extension Warehouse for the first time. And you can search that by selection toys. And I won't search for every single extensions that I'll be mentioning because the searching process does take time, but there is a little screenshot inside of the PDF that I had shared, so you can certainly reference that. And it is from a gentleman called TomTom, and we'll see him multiple times and his picture multiple times today. But it's a selection toys that you can download. Basically, it has a filter function to this so that you can select things quite easily. So when I was actually selecting these light bulbs or the lighting fixture, the pendant lights, I just went and selected these by individually. However, that process could be a lot faster if I were to right click and then on the drop down menu, I can find select active. And once I do that, it's going to select all the ones that are within this group. So there I can cut away and then paste in place, that sort of thing. So that selection process becomes really easy. And then I'll do the same over here. I want these lighting fixtures on the sconces on this side of the wall as well. So I'll select these, and I like the function of mirror tool. So that's something that you can also look up on the ExtensionStore. And I probably am going a different order, but it's a mirror tool. The icon looks like this. And I have a shortcut of Shift M for that. And then I can find the midpoint on this wall because I know this wall expands that way. And I click and click twice. So I went along the green line and then now I'm along the blue line that basically draws a green line and blue line of a reference. And do I erase the original selection? No, I want to keep it where it was. No. And then basically I've copied over or mirrored those lights into this side. So that tells you that I can basically, it's right up against the wall. So there's no question about it floating and misplaced. That gives me a control method of mirroring objects and copying over to different place. So that's what I wanted to mention. Something that we had not addressed, although I mentioned at the beginning, was that the backside is showing over here. So what's happening over here is I'm missing the road surface or the pavement surface. And often you can go into here and then unhide the rest so that I can actually work on this thing. But ideally, you're going to start, doing this, drawing lines and some triangulation method to figure out where things need to be. And you can certainly get rid of blue that way and also try to throw in a rectangle shape like this. But the native rectangle tool actually doesn't play so nicely like this. There is a way to actually get that quite easily with the rectangle tool, but I also find offsetting or push pulling a line a lot easier too. And that's an extension that's available through Extension Warehouse. And that icon looks like this one over here, push line. And it is one from a DBO push line. That's called a DBO push line. And I actually have a shortcut of not shift to 0, but shift O. So once I do that, so I pre-select this line, Shift O, and then I just click this line over here and that line here, and then it just push pulls the line and creates a surface. And then I can easily use a line tool to draw that and then put a road surface for this car to rest on. And obviously, this car is floating, and I'll be using this tool quite often. Let me go ahead and actually talk about some array functions before that. So let me go ahead and put some surface on here. And then also one line over there so that we have, and then I'm gonna just erase this so that, soften this so that you don't see the seam of the triangle, and it actually has that sort of curvature. And there's going to be something called Raytracer from TomTom. It's available through Extension Warehouse. I'm actually going out of order. I apologize, but I feel it's necessary. So here on the planter, I've got an Enscape asset over here. So in order to get Enscape asset, you can go and click on this dialog or the button over there. And then under the Enscape asset library, you can find vegetation, and you can find any of these odd planters that you would like to use. And that's what I have put down over here. So once I actually rendered this scene, that is going to show up as an actual planter rather than this green blob. But if you want to array this, you use SketchUp native array function or move copy, which is pre-selecting it, just following or moving your mouse across a specific axis that you would like to. I want to move it to 2 feet. So I hit 2: enter, and then I'm gonna say 10x enter. And once I do that, it is going to array. And again, I want to select this and array over once more. I'm gonna use the selection toy, which is right click, instances, select active, and then move over to this way, 2 feet again, and then 2x. That way I have it arrayed like this. And then the entire thing, I'm going to go ahead and select active again. I'm gonna make sure that it is actually floating above the surface. The reason for that is because I wanna drop them. And one is called TomTom's Raytracer. And if I use that, I can drop components, and then I can drop it to the surface of the curvature. And another function to that is if I right click on this one, select that and then go to Raytracer, and I can actually drop it by bounds. If I do that, then it is going to be sloped as well. So the bounds are going to respect the surface that it is resting on. So you can easily drop it like that and then have things actually drop on to correct position. For example, this car is resting, nope, not really. So in that case, you can go ahead, and because it's a flat surface, I can just go ahead and drop it, and it is going to be fine. So you can certainly do that. And in renderings, you don't want to have planters this way because it's going to look really odd in actual rendering. So we're going to go through some randomizing process, but I do want to look at other things to see if I have missed something. The one that I want to mention is Chris Fulmer's here, Scale and Rotate Multiple. That one is called this one. So CLF Scale and Rotate Multiple, available through Extension Warehouse. And then make sure you select all of those by using Selection Toy, and then go to Extensions, and then Scale, Rotate Multiple, and then you want to do it randomly. And in this case, everything is fine, but I don't want it to be reduced too far or scaled too far, too big. So I'm going to keep this as 1, and then put this one as, say, 0.7. And then rotation, I want to have a random rotation on here so that you can see how randomized those things are. So I'm going to just type in 360. Okay. And you see how everything is now randomized so that it looks more natural, and it will certainly do a better job of rendering a scene this way. Another aspect that you can add on here is something that you may not have noticed is that normally once you bring in an asset from Asset Library of Enscape, for example, if I were to bring in this bush over here, you'll see that those things actually come in as white and has no material on it. So once I bring in, what I do is I select them and then put them into a specific type of tag that I like. So this one, I will just put it into plants. Somehow I distinguish between plants versus trees. You can certainly comment on that, but that's just what happened to be. But also I assign a slight green color or more natural color, if you will. So for the trunk, I actually want to assign some sort of trunk-like or bark-like texture to it. So I create a new texture and then try to find something that is relevant for that specific thing, and then just call it plant trunk. And then accept that, and then go into this model by double clicking it, and then assign that on here so that it is actually, you know, legible as a different color on it. And then as far as assigning a material, what I do is assign material on top of the component rather than inside. Once you do that, you can actually control it to different colors because this is a default color. So there's a lighter green, and then I can have a darker green, or make another even darker color so that I can have some variation within these so that they look a bit more natural inside of the SketchUp view, even if it's not rendered. In the render view, it will look the same. However, having a bit of a variation is definitely helpful, even if it's not being rendered on your native SketchUp view. So that's what I tend to do. However, in order to get randomized results of this, you know, obviously you can just go ahead and just kind of randomly click. But also something that I do is random selection. And random select is available via SketchUcation store and via a person called Tig. And if you select all of them, and then I can go ahead and find the random select, and I just type in percentage 50, enter. And then I can just activate the paint bucket tool and drop it to have 50% of them being in this color. I noticed this bug where it is not necessarily 50%. I count this and I guess it's not exactly 50%. I don't know what's going on, but yeah, you can easily fix that by just dropping a couple more different color or material. So you can certainly control that way. And something I do want to mention here, I got weird colored trees here. I basically was doing the same thing of randomizing or trying to have different colored trees in the scene. I certainly don't want this blue thing here. And also if I want to reset whatever the assigned color that you have, because you've got an asset or a type of component that you got from elsewhere and then never got to consolidate, then you can just come out of it, select it, and then find something called Material Tools by TomTom from ExtensionStore, and then remove it from selection. And once I do that, it becomes completely white. so that I can go about adding different material and textures. So I'm going to grab that trunk again and then go in here and then add that trunk color so that I can start to reassign whatever the color that I want. Same thing for these trees. I can go ahead and assign a color or randomize with the Crease Fulmer tools. And then here, 1, and then maybe 8, and then just kind of rotate them. So all of these trees become a bit more randomized. I'm aware we are at 1:45. Do we have any questions, Gemma?
We do, yeah. So there was one on how to customize shortcuts.
Oh, I think I did mention it during the session. You can go to Window Preferences and you find a menu under Shortcut, and you can see it there. It was mentioned earlier session.
Brilliant. And there was actually a question about whether we will share a recording, and we will. So then, yeah, it'll be a lot easier for you to go back and check out the things that Joseph is showing. There was one other question as well. Do you know if these extensions are also available on SketchUp for Mac?
SketchUp for Mac, yes, absolutely. And I believe exactly same list will be available on SketchUcation too. So all of these extensions should work for both Windows and Mac.
Fantastic, thank you. And that's all we have for now. So if you do have more questions, get them in because we may have time for a few more questions at the end.
Yeah. So a couple more material stuff that I want to go through before wrapping up the session, but whilst that, I actually want to have Enscape on the side so that you can see what's happening. Often I utilize synchronizing the scene just so that you see exactly what you're modeling and being revised into, and notice how everything here that we modeled is looking like a bush, although not different colors. But it's good to have these sort of variation within trees so that you see them as a bit more random rather than all lined up. Because once you have it lined up, it's really noticeable. So that, and then there is something called Material Replacer. So for example, if we go inside over here, if you look at this panel, this panel over here, I don't really like the wooden texture over here. So something I can do is go to Enscape Material Library, and they've got a ton of materials that you can use. And in here, I can find some sort of wood texture that I would like to use, and then perhaps find something that is flat. So import selection. Once I do that, you'll see that becomes added here. So I can close this, and then once that is added, I can use Paint Bucket tool to assign it on top of here, and it is not changing, and that's the wrong place to add it to. So like this. And same thing over here. But I don't want to go through every single panel to do this practice. So the way to do this is by basically, I don't like the fact that it is actually giving me different color. So I'm going to go ahead and actually change it to darker color so that I can at least see it on SketchUp side. So here I can use something called Material Replacer by TomTom. I believe Material Replacer here. Control B for shortcuts that I use. And what it does is basically I'm going to tell it to replace all of these texture that's called Wood 02 with this Wood 15 that I just got. And once I click that, it is going to automatically update all of those, and I don't need to go to different groups to figure that out. So that's all been replaced, and that's what I wanted to do with the Material Replacer. I do have to mention architectures because they are just so great. It is called, you can download this from the extension Warehouse. And in here, you can download all sorts of materials, and that is seamless textures. So you can certainly use them and manipulate them to different degrees. And you can certainly read up their terms of use. It is going to be limited for free versions, but freely available for not commercial use is what I read last time. So you can certainly do your reading on there. But once you find the texture or even edit them to your liking, so if I want different texture on it, different type of stack, obviously herringbone of wood, that's quite nice. And I can import that, and then that becomes imported into SketchUp. And then I can just apply that to different surface like this one here. So that all shows in rendering, and it's a super simple, fast way of getting seamless texture added to your scene. So that looks nice. And something that I did want to mention was using scale tool quite often. So I just use scale tool for extending walls like this rather than using push pull. And then you can do it like that. And then you can just right click and then hit scale definition so that the textures inside of it doesn't become stretched. And that's a super simple way of extending and stretching different type of walls rather than drawing lines and push pulling all the time, especially if you want to contain them inside of the group. So I think I've covered quite a few there. Before we go into the Q&A session, there are two things that I want to quickly mention is using the Enscape Material Library again. I can find some tiles, and I wanted to have nice backsplash of subway tiles. So if I can find one, perhaps something like this, that is super clean. Click that, close it, and then there is a backsplash component right there, as you can see. So I can just apply that material there, and then you can see how it applies immediately on there. So that even has a bump on it, so you can kind of see the mortar joints on there that is having that bump effect, which is very nice. So that is completely utilizable on the Enscape side. And when we go to the outside where we look at the pond a little bit, you'll see that I haven't done anything to this material. I just assigned it as a name of pool and then had a little bit of transparency on it. And that already makes the pool somewhat reflective because it's understanding it as sort of a glass material. So I think that is still very convincing. But if you don't have any transparency, it's going to look very flat and not water-like. And in this case, you can go ahead and simply type in water to the name of it. And then Enscape is going to understand it as water, therefore stick a water reflected texture on it. You can control and fine tune this water texture by adding a bit more ripple on it. And there's a wind that you can turn on, so you have a nice gentle ripple on it. But I think a lot of pond or architectural water scenes, you don't need all that much of a ripple to make it convincing. So in this case, I can even go to just making it as a generic texture, as long as it's sort of a dark color, and then just make it reflective by lowering roughness. And I feel that is also very convincing as a water, still water on a pool. So that's what I typically do for these type of water scene, just dark texture with zero roughness. But as far as these keywords go, anytime that you have a keyword grass or water, so here's a little cheat sheet. Water, ocean, river will draw as water surface, and then vegetation, foliage, leaf makes it translucency. Emissive makes it a material that is emissive, therefore it sheds light onto the scene. And then grass, tall grass, and so on, along with a long carpet, short carpet. So definitely utilize those keywords in your material names so that they actually appear as grass in your scene, so that it is not a completely flat surface. So that's it. We can certainly wrap it up here and open for a Q&A session.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Joseph. Lots to take in. So I'm glad that we have a handout and the recording for everyone. That's going to be super handy for everyone. We do have a few questions. So a couple of people have been asking about lighting and how is it possible to add lights in SketchUp or Enscape so that they emit light. Don't know if that's something you can quickly look
Quickly,
at.
yeah, sure, absolutely. So the way I've done it, and I was going to cover this a little bit if I hadn't run out of time, so maybe session 2 right there. But here, all the scenes are being rendered as, sorry, it does have some lighting in here. These material actually have emissivity in them. So for example, if I were to go Enscape Material Dialog over here and sample this, you'll see that these have self-illumination value. So these are not necessarily shedding a lot of light into the scene, but they appear as a light bulb or light source. Now, in order for you to install lighting and actually be effective within the scene, then you also have to put in a lighting object. So you add that by going to that button over there on top. Now my screen becomes very cluttered, but Enscape objects, and then you put down a lighting sphere, and then you can just put down anywhere you like. And then basically that becomes your light source. And what I usually do is I cut this and then go into a specific type of a light fixture that I want to add it to, and then whichever that makes sense to you, and then paste on there. So if I paste this object onto this lighting fixture, it means that because this is a component, now that is going to be seen on that component right here too. And you can just see here, but actually there's a hidden lighting fixture, sorry, this spheric light that I already have put in. So it is not really visible in your scene. I typically make this completely transparent so that you don't see it in a SketchUp view. But for this session, I wanted to kind of mention that there. So I just kind of made it a little bit visible there. But I usually assign a material and make it completely transparent so that they become light source within your scene. And I've done that practice to all of these. So you can kind of see that lighting object that is placed over here. And then you can change the intensity of that light via this dialog from Enscape. Next question.
Are the extensions mentioned today free or paid?
Most of them that I have mentioned are freely available with the exception of architecture. There are a lot of extensions that you can pay to get, and they are great as well. But I wanted to get all of your feet wet with the free ones that are available. The one that I know for sure that you need to pay for is Enscape. Enscape is an extension and it is something that you have to pay for. But other than that, they're mostly freely available.
Fantastic. Then there was a question, how can we transfer the bump properties from architectures?
Now, so that kind of conflicts with the free version. So free version, I believe, doesn't give you any bump map from architectures. But once you have that, the bump map available, once you click on or sample the material from SketchUp side, and once you sample that whilst the dialog is open, it is going to open up this dialog, and then you can use either albedo or you can actually designate a specific map, and that's where you're going to start choosing the one from architectures, and then you'll be able to assign the bump map to that material that you are using.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And there are quite a few other questions coming through on lighting. So what I'll do in the follow-up email, I'll be sure to add a couple of blog posts or tutorials that explain a little bit more about that. Maybe just one more question on materials. So, I mean, Enscape has the material library, but are there any other places that you like to go to find textures and to add to your renderings?
I've been keeping my own setup library, that the materials that I like and the ones that I have edited to fit my needs. So I certainly go back to my own library and my old files to find it. But other than that, Enscape themselves, the material library is a good place to get things from. And also architectures is a great place. If everything fails, yeah, you just got to Google and Photoshop some images yourself. And there are a ton of paid assets available out there. It's just a matter of how much you're willing to pay.
Brilliant. Well, we are at time, so I think we'll wrap things up there. But thank you so much, Joseph. That was a fantastic webinar, packed full of lots of insights. So thank you very much for walking us through everything.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you. And just to let everyone know, there is going to be an exit survey that will pop up on your screen when you leave. And that is your opportunity to provide us with your feedback. We'd love to know what we could have done today to improve the experience for you. And if there are any topics that you would like us to cover in future webinars, then let us know and we'll do our best to accommodate those. So with that, thanks again, everyone, for joining. We will send out the webinar recording shortly. Thank you again, Joseph, for presenting. And with that, I wish you all a great day and we will see you again soon. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.